A lot of chat on social media today about the Yorkshire investigation into institutional racism. Azeem Rafiq posted earlier on today, George de Bell's been heavily involved in kind of publicising or the lack of activity. Azim came on the Cricket Badger podcast last August, which is about a year ago, to talk about his struggles. Wisden obviously did their piece as well in advance of that. And it wasn't until George took it on and got it to more people with Cricket Info that Yorkshire actually took it seriously and actually made any comment at all. But 344 days ago, they actually announced they were going to do an investigation into Azim's claims and to look at institutional racism. And that is a long time. As I understand it, the report has been finished by the investigators. It is sat at Headingley, and it has not been unveiled, announced, published, whatever that would be. And it comes to something where I, who am a passionate Yorkshire supporter, I've worked at the club, I've supported them, and I want them to do well. And this is my motivation, really. I want them to be great on the pitch, and I want them to be great off it. At the moment, they are not great off it. This investigation needs to be published. And if it's not, ECB needs to step up and do something here, because the ECB are banging the drum. They're wearing T-shirts with inclusivity on it. We've seen Sky do what they've done in terms of Black Lives Matter and Ebony and Michael Holding. But people need to stop talking the talk and start walking the walk with this subject, because it's important. And you can't just brush this under the carpet and hope it goes away, Yorkshire County Cricket Club. I'm actually quite ashamed to have associations with Yorkshire at the moment, because they are not acting in the right way. Neil, you did a tweet this morning that got a bit of traction, sort of saying, when is this going to actually sort itself out? When is this actually going to end? Are they going to be allowed to get away with this? They're not going to be allowed to get away with this, because ultimately this report has to be published at some stage. But cricket needs to look like it's taking this seriously, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it's getting beyond ridiculous to the stage where it's almost like they're waiting for something else to blow up so they can quietly release it and hope it gets lost in another major story breaking. But no one's taking ownership of it. The ECB have a duty to oversee cricket across the country. They're not directly involved with Yorkshire, but they represent cricket fans across the country. And it seems ironic that they're talking so vividly and so loudly about finding new audiences, especially reaching out to the Afro-Caribbean and British Asian audiences with the 100. And they can't see that this sort of thing is driving those communities away from cricket, because they see how players who look like them get treated.
There's a difference now between wearing a T-shirt and saying some slogans and actually acting like you mean it, isn't there?
And apparently within their own discrimination code, there is a commitment to ensure that any investigation is both independent and timely. And they should be expecting the same from the counties. I saw I didn't hear the interview, but I saw the transcript of an interview that Alton Mitchell did with Ian Watmore.
I listened to that on the Stump podcast, yeah.
Yeah, he basically said, yeah, not our issue. It's all to do with Yorkshire.
I'll just jump in to defend him a little bit on that, because I don't know if Ali gave him advance notice of that question. It might have been just kind of like lumped on him. And in that sort of situation, I can understand him saying, I don't want to actually talk about that specific case, because he might not have. I mean,
that sounded to me
he should know about it, but I wondered whether he was just buying a bit of time. I would hope that he would, off the back of that interview, if he is as good as I've heard that he is, he goes away from that Nakul and actually investigates it a bit more and takes it a bit more seriously.
But when it's inconceivable that he doesn't know about it and that there isn't some ECB involvement, it's just inconceivable after 352 days as of today, as Azeem Rafiq tweeted today. Since
it's 352 days since he did the initial interview. It's 344 since the investigation began.
Right. Okay. at least 300 too many.
Yeah,
250 maybe, if we're being a little bit generous. I mean, there's two things there. One, that sounded to me like Ian Watmore was saying, I can't comment legally at this stage. You have to ask the question because you're a journalist and you're a good journalist, but I can't answer that at this stage. So I had, I heard rumours of all sorts. I don't know how substantiated they are, that the ECB are very well aware of this and are waiting for the fudge to come out, because the report coming out won't actually. The fear at this stage, and the fear from the start, was that the investigation itself, or certainly the report, would be a fudge, would be heavily diluted, that its recommendations wouldn't be taken seriously, however strong they were, and that this was all done essentially so Yorkshire could talk the talk without walking the walk. They say, we've done this investigation and it's independent and it's got these people on it, but if nothing happens with that, and all you have achieved is further eroding the faith that your own players and your own fan base and the wider cricket community have in you. You've achieved nothing, and you've made Azeem Rafiq be incredibly vulnerable just to get the slightest amount of non-progress.
I've talked to Azim regularly over the years since I interviewed him. Talked to him multiple times a week, and the lad's gone through hell about this. He 344 days since the investigation started. He's thought about that pretty much every hour, every minute since that 344 days started. It's causing problems mentally for him. It's causing, obviously, it affects his wife, it affects his kids, it affects everybody. He's living with that every day. And
the report is going into stuff that he's been dealing with for over a decade. Stuff that has been happening to him by people who were meant to be looking out for him for a decade. We understand, we don't know at this stage what the report says, but we have some idea of what it doesn't say. We understand that key witnesses were not talked to. We understand that it hasn't been as independent as we were all promised. As far as it, you could almost, certainly the suspicion was that, let's say, any investigation, any report, as often happens, in government reports or in, I remember the BCCI have had some independent reports into them, that those recommendations are left up to the investigated party. You're in danger of the entire thing looking like a sham. And I think that would be doing a huge disservice to the work that the ECB are genuinely trying to do, and the research that is genuinely being looked at, and the work that is genuinely being done by the ACE program, by the Dynamos program, by All Stars, by some of the initiatives going into the 100, the South Asian Action program.
Is it time, though, Nakul, for the ECB to maybe be a little bit more visible, and for Mr. Watmore to actually, say, I am actually going to do something here, and we need to chivvy Yorkshire up with this, because this is just going on too long.
I would hope that is happening behind the scenes and has been for some time. I can, without knowing the legal position and whatever, I can understand him not wanting to, jeopardize the case in public. But I think the chivying up stage has long since been reached. My worry is that the report will come out and then Yorkshire will pretend that that's their entire duty of care observed, when in fact I think it's an insult really to suggest that that's the case.
Any views on it, Mark, from your perspective? I mean, Lancashire fan, you never usually need any excuse to give Yorkshire a kicking, but I mean, this basically isn't about one county, really. It's about one county, but it's about a big subject that covers cricket.
Yeah, I think it's been highlighted in Yorkshire and by Rafiq in that particular county, but I've no doubt that institutionalised racism is not it's not just part of being one county. It's probably endemic in most counties, I would imagine. Yeah.
I have picked up on a lot of stories over the last year since I interviewed Michael Carberry and Azim last year. I've picked up on a lot of stories. A coach at one county basically spiking the drink of a Muslim player. Things that go on and are just seen as a joke in a dressing room that aren't funny. And
I mean, I'll be blunt with you. It's not just in county cricket. I mean, league cricket in the north. In my experience, has got lots of issues in terms of that.
Well, we heard one of a club chairman in South Yorkshire saying some appalling things about
Well, I will
Azeem
just give you
Rafiq and South
another
Asian players.
appalling example that clubs are reluctant to employ packies as pros because they don't put anything behind the bar, for example. Yeah, on the sense that they don't drink and so forth. Yeah, that they won't employ, etc., etc. That's pretty much. You get those comments quite a lot in different clubs. I'm not saying it's in all clubs, but it's there. It's there. It's been there for years, donkey's years.
It's naive, I think, for people to say, because when I interviewed Michael Carberry and I interviewed Azim last year, I got a little bit more vocal on the subject, and I should have been vocal for years, but I haven't been. But people came to me on Twitter and said, "Well, it's not in cricket. What are you talking about? You know, one instance here or one instance there doesn't say that racism in cricket. Racism is in society." And cricket is part of society, so it's naive completely to suggest that racism doesn't infiltrate into cricket. It's just a stupid thing to say.
And it's kind of, it's more kind of subtle these days. And so, for example, in league cricket, West Indian cricketers are always looked on far more fondly because they, are seen as part of more of the group, the cultural in-group. So it's not quite as dramatic with West Indian cricketers in league cricket at times. Although I know the unfortunate incident in Yorkshire was about a West Indian cricketer, I think just generally just developing that point about inclusivity. I mean, I could have gone to Lords this week and it was going to cost me like £400 for 3 days, a test match. I mean, how is that? How are the ECB addressing those issues about getting people from different communities and different backgrounds into the, the kind of home of cricket? When they're charging, I could afford it if I wanted to. I'm a middle class man, but I wasn't going to pay it. When they're charging those prices just for one person, how can you take a family to watch a day's Test cricket at Lords? Unless you're earning a huge amount of money. And then when you look round Lords, I know there were a few Indian fans there today. All I could mainly see was middle-aged men drinking and moneyed individuals, having a good time. There's no change in the social demographic in terms of the crowd at Lords, from what I can see. So I think the ECB also, regardless of what they're doing with Chance to Shine, all these different initiatives, which are very worthy, they need to be doing a lot more practical things to actually get people into grounds.
It's got to change, and it's got to start changing with this Yorkshire investigation. 344 days since they announced that this investigation into allegations about institutional racism. 344 days. That is a long, long time. It's enough to get this sorted out and get it published, and it needs to be published soon because it needs to be put to bed so we can move on from it as a Yorkshire County Cricket Club, so Azim can move on with his life, and so that we can make some proper tangible changes if required by the investigation to actually get racism as a blight out of Yorkshire cricket. Before we finish today, let's get back to the Test match. India 364.
James, I just heard an interview with Ferdus Munder on the Great Cricketer, I think, talking about South Africa, where on the back of Lungi Ngidi's comments during BLM, they're having a government investigation with open interviews for anyone who's been affected by racism in South African cricket. And we're hearing some horrendous stories, but there is that open forum which is bringing these to the fore. And
it's almost like an amnesty, isn't it? It's kind of like, bring your knife in and you're not going to be held responsible. Come and get this off your chest. Tell us your experiences, and it's not going to be held against you. And I think that's a healthy way to go. I mean, I went out to South Africa in 2012. And there's been kind of like a political kind of beastie, and obviously been very aware of Nelson Mandela and the apartheid regime. And I went out to see Nelson's cell and watched. And I was quite shocked at the time about how much racism there still was in South Africa. I probably shouldn't have been, because there's going to be hangovers and people taking on the same attitudes post-apartheid as were still there before it. But it's a country that has to move on, and would probably take a few generations to actually get to an acceptable level.
Yeah,
that's the right phrase.
30 years doesn't undo 150.
No.
And I think it's almost naive to think that Yorkshire will change significantly off the back of this report, to be honest, judging from everything we know. I mean, George de Bell wrote an article almost immediately about the lack of independence of the investigating body, of the solicitors firm that was handling it, and their links to a senior figure at Yorkshire. I mean, this is.
Well, the chairman used to work for the legal company that was appointed. And
he was a
it kind of
partner
smacks of, I mean, anybody that's ever watched Yes Prime Minister or Yes Minister, whenever there was an independent inquiry, it was always, oh, let's get to lead it. Let's get that guy that's our friend who wants a knighthood or something like that. It's kind of smacks of that, doesn't it? It's kind of dealings behind the scenes. I don't know if that is the case. That's just an allegation, but it does it leaves a club open to that suggestion that it's not maybe as independent as it should be.